Hey guys, I'm Clover, and welcome back to another theory. This week's theory is going to be quite a bit different than most, because I'm practicing a new editing style. Because for a while, I've just been using Google Slides as the background for my videos. But now that I'm beginning to get more time as my school is beginning to wrap up, I'm being able to actually spend time editing them. Before we get into the video, I would like to thank everyone for 200 subscribers. And ask people to subscribe because my goal is to get to 500 subscribers by the end of my school term. If you've been a fan for a while, you would have probably recognized me by all of my old theories having the very Google Slide style. But from now on, I'm planning on having a much more edited style, and this is just the first step towards that. Also, if you're one of the few people to watch my Undertale Yellow video from last Monday, you'll have remembered I said that I was going to be doing a everything you need to know before Delta Chapter 3 and 4 video today. But I realised I miscounted the days, and actually that video is coming out next week, as is 3 theories, not 2 theories. And other than that, I hope you enjoy this theory, which was supposed to come out ages ago, but it's coming out now. Okay, before we get into the meat of the theory, I want to talk about a few things I think are important to talk about when it comes to determination and magic to help set a base level for understanding. First of all, with determination, the few points I want to go over are: determination is found within human souls and monster souls. This is important to state because a lot of people don't think monsters naturally have determination, although this is never actually stated within the game. More determination is able to be produced naturally even in monsters. This is important because this is what Undyne does. But also, it's important to note that naturally, determination is found less within monster souls than in human souls. Also, determination is able to be extracted from souls and injected into them. It's because of that reason I believe personally that determination is a form of a liquid. Determination gives souls power to persist after death if they have enough of it, and a monster with too much determination will melt along with their soul. As for magic, I think it's important to say these things. Magic is found within human souls and monster souls. Again, like with determination, not a lot of people think humans have magic naturally, but they do. Monsters have a lot more magic naturally than humans do. Monster bodies are also made up of magic more than they are of matter. Also with monsters, their magic reflects their personalities and heritage, which is why a lot of magic fits with the personalities of the user and also relates to different people in their family. This one's less important, but I still think it's interesting to state that magic is able to be infused into items. And finally, even monsters that are animalistic, like Frogget, can still have great control over their magic, showing that monsters naturally have this level of control. Basing on the fact that you either need a human to absorb a monster boss soul, or a monster to absorb a human soul to be able to cross the barrier, I'm going to actually assume that humans absorb the magic of a monster soul, while monsters absorb the determination of a human soul. The reason I say this is because if a human soul was to absorb the determination of a monster, it would increase their determination to a point where they would likely be able to reset, even if they're not Frisk. Also, if both magic and determination can be absorbed in the same way, or a similar way, I'm going to be able to assume that determination and magic are at least similar in functionality when it comes to their physical forms, which means that magic is also a physical substance within a soul, the same way determination is. Based on the existence of magic being able to change shape and float through the air through bullets, and also take the form of the monsters, I'm going to say that magic is in the form of a gas, while determination is in the form of a liquid. This also explains why, when monsters turn to dust, the sound of them turning to dust is similar to that of air escaping. I'll put an example of both now. For the ratio itself, I split it between the amount of determination that can fit into the smallest volume of magic And also, determination is obviously in ounces. So the way this ratio works is you have the weakest magic potential, as in the smallest amount of magic, and the strongest. The weakest being the smallest amount of magic can fit into, and the strongest being the amount of determination that can be fit into that magic. You can get the max magic strength by timesing the magic number by the determination number, as in game it always shows that determination amplifies magic. The ratio itself can be used to explain why we get as much EXP as we do in everything except for late game genocides. And we can even use the EXP we get to figure out how much determination and magic a monster might have. So the sum I've come up with to get EXP from determination and magic is in brackets determination times magic, then times that by 10. And you can reverse this if you have determination or magic to figure out the missing variable. Next up, now that I actually have explained the ratio itself, I'm going to explain it within the context of an enemy, specifically Undyne. First of all, to figure out the determination of a monster, there's 3 different categories they can fall under. Firstly, a monster that dies instantly after going to 0 health. These monsters are going to be labelled with 1 determination, as they can't even survive for a second after dying. Secondly, you have monsters that have enough determination to have final words. This is pretty much any mini-boss you find in the game, as they have enough determination that once they go to 0 health, they are able to remain for a moment. And finally, monsters whose souls can last for moments after death. This is 3 determination and it's only found within boss monsters, and this makes sense because they have to have more determination for their souls to be able to exist after they die, which allows them to be absorbed. We also get an example during a genocide run of a higher natural determination value being achieved, this being Undyne becoming Undyne the Undying. First of all, let's figure out what the base magic level of regular Undyne is, so that we can figure out how much determination increase happens between Undyne and Undying Undyne. So to figure out the sum for Undyne, what we do is we get the XP, which is 500, then divide that by 10. This gives us 50, which means if we divide that by 2, which is the determination value she has, that gives us a magic level of 25. Now, the magic level will not increase when Undyne powers up into Undyne Undying, but the determination will. So what we can actually do is take Undyne Undying's EXP, which is 1500, divide that by 10, then divide that by 25, which will give us the value of determination after she increases. And that gives us 6 determination, meaning that Undyne's ratio is 2:25, but Undyne the Undying's ratio is 6:25. This also explains the fact that Undyne the Undying goes through a form change, as her magic is what gives her form, so if determination is boosting that magic, then it makes sense that her form will also get a significant boost as well. For a bit of a shorter bit, I wanted to talk about a few different monster ratios that I think are interesting. First of all, Frogget. This is the first enemy we see in the game, and it gives us only a bit of EXP. With the 1 determination, what we get is a magic level of 2, as we get 20 EXP from them. Papyrus, on the other hand, obviously has 2 determination, and with that we can figure out that the Papyrus magic level is 10, being 2:10 as the ratio. Next, Greater Doggo has a ratio of 1:8, and Muffet interestingly has a determination value of 1, as she isn't able to say anything after dying. But this means she has quite a high magic level at 30, which makes sense as she is able to change the soul colour. Metaton, on the other hand, has 40 magic, being more powerful than Undyne and 2 determination. Although I would put pause to this, as it would make sense that Metaton's robot form might give them a boost. Teme has a ratio of 1:4, and Sundry Plane is interesting with a ratio of 1:9.5. And then something like Glide would have like 1:10. Next up, I will talk about different levels a soul can reach of determination and what it means for the soul itself. 1, 2, and 3 are pretty easy to explain as I've already done it, so I'm just going to put explanations on screen again. 4, this is the only one I don't think I have an actual in-game example of. So this explanation is fully just guessing based off other levels. But what I think level 4 would be is a monster being able to come back to life after dying, but dying soon after because they don't have enough power to survive. A level 5 is basically the same as 4, but after they come back, they are able to keep their form together for a bit long, for like ever, but they're going to be much weaker than they were before. At level 6, a monster is able to come fully back from the dead and be stronger than before, and they will be able to keep their form for a decent while. Obviously, this is Undyne. Then at 7, I'm going to say that this is the average determination level for a human. As we see, there's 7 humans who fall down, you need 7 human souls to cross the barrier, and it was 7 sorcerers who made the barrier. So I thought the number 7 means a lot to humans, so it makes sense for that to be the determination required for a soul to persist after death. At 8, we find Frisk throughout most of the game. We know Frisk must have more determination than the average human, as most humans weren't able to come back over and over again like we were. Then level 9 is interesting, because I think this is true pacifist Frisk, where you're able to fully come back to life forever, over and over and over. And this is the natural max for a human. And I think 9's a good max, since Kara always says 9 is the thing you have to achieve, and it's the highest number. But I do think it could be possible to get higher than this. But I think at that point, even a human soul might begin to melt. I have a lot more evidence for this later, but I think it's just important to state now. Now, I want to talk a bit about the Amalgams, since I think this theory fits really neatly into our understandings of the Amalgams. First of all, we need to understand the fact that Alphys took all of the souls from Asgore, extracted determination from each of them, and then injected that into the monsters. And I'm going to assume the fact that we are mentioned multiple souls, and the fact that Alphys is obviously quite recent to Underground, along with Metatron, that all 6 souls were present at the time of Alphys doing these experiments. Looking at what happened with the monsters, we can assume what amount of determination value they had before and after. Given the fact that we were told they were just random families, it makes sense for each of them to only have 1 determination when they came in. But also we know they came back to life after being dead, so they have to at least have 4 determination after being injected. And with the fact that they're able to keep their form, a 6 or 7 is more likely. We can even use the souls to figure out a more specific number. If we assume that all 6 souls were used, and that only a bit of determination was taken from each, we could assume that 1 level of determination was taken from each soul and injected into each monster, giving each monster a new level of 7 determination, which would give them the power to resist after death. And this would make sense, as Alphys wanted the souls to have the power of a human soul. This most likely means that the Amalgams weren't able to die in the same way Undyne was, since their souls were able to persist after death. And as monster souls have their bodies be an extension of them rather than a vessel of humans, it means their physical forms also can't die with their soul, which means they continue to melt longer than Undyne did. I also think, this is something I'll explain more later, but that as they melt, they lose determination, but because they melted together, their souls were able to get enough mass to be and matter to be able to contain determination and go back up to 7, which now means these amalgams each have 7 determination, giving them the power to not be able to die, as again their bodies are extensions of their souls, meaning that if their souls can't die, their bodies can't die either. The next thing I want to talk about is Snowdrake's mother. Whilst we know that when they start melting, they can melt with other monsters to keep their mass and keep the determination and survive, but it is theoretically possible if a monster was to gain the determination to survive, that they could naturally stop gaining determination, which would counteract them losing it, causing them to level out at a lower level. What I've just explained actually fits up perfectly with Snowdrake's mother, as Snowdrake's mother is the only monster to only show one sentience, which is Snowdrake's mother calling out to Snowy, and also makes sense that she had determination because she would want to survive to see Snowy again. Also, Snowdrake's mother, as shown by Half-Red Chaos, is interesting because they are able to be killed, unlike every other monster who is immortal and is unable to take damage. This means that Snowdrake's mother determination level has to be lower, presumably being a level 5, as they don't die instantly, but come back in a weaker state. Now it's time to explain why I think monsters in Undertale's universe melt. Even though... No, I'll do that. Monsters with Undertale's bodies are the magic exiting their soul and floating around, taking form of their form. This makes sense to me, but what happens if their souls, which don't have that much matter, have too much determination, which is a liquid in it and it's heavy? I think it starts bursting through the soul and starts entering their physical form, and because determination is a liquid, it means that their bodies start becoming more and more liquid and gas, giving them gravity and start making them slowly fall to the ground. This makes sense why they melt in the way they do, because it's their forms literally becoming less gas and more liquid. Also, this would explain why they lose determination, as stated in my theory, because the determination in their soul is literally leaking out of it, trying to escape because they don't have enough mass to keep it in, as monsters don't have that much matter. But when they melt together, the amount of matter they have increases to the point where it's enough to count as one human soul, allowing them to store all 7 points of determination. Next up, I want to talk about how I think soul absorbing works, as I think it changes depending on whether a human is absorbing a soul or a monster is absorbing a soul. For starters, we know for a fact that a monster absorbing a human soul has the exact same effect and value as a human absorbing a monster soul. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that humans should be able to absorb the determination of a monster, as that would be too dangerous. Also, the fact that monsters break wouldn't make sense if we absorb the soul, as once we absorb it, the monster soul would end up breaking. But instead, what I think is human souls absorb the magic from them, take the power straight from them, or whatever the naturally higher power in the soul is, they take that from them and put it in their soul, which is why stuff like we see Asgore's soul breaking, and yet we still have enough power to cross through the barrier. But I actually think monsters do it differently, because if monsters did it the same way, then when they absorb a human soul, they would just take the determination from the soul and absorb it into them, which would then cause them to melt. Instead, I think we can think of monsters as like a server, where the monster soul is a computer and is able to add other human souls or other souls as servers, which they're able to take the power from and use it from a distance, which means their soul doesn't have to store all of the power itself. This also makes sense since when Azrael absorbs the souls, unlike with humans, the monster souls don't end up breaking and instead are still fully intact within Azrael. Now I want to talk about the idea that humans can't absorb human souls. I think this was a misconception by Alphys, because it's very clear that Alphys doesn't fully understand everything about souls. And instead, I think the reason that humans don't absorb human souls is because humans take the power, as I said earlier, straight from the soul, meaning they would take the human determination from that soul into theirs, which would cause their determination to skyrocket way above 9. And I think that even human souls, with the amount of matter they have, can't handle more than 9 determination at a time, which would cause them to melt. But unlike monsters, their bodies are vessels and not extensions, meaning that their bodies aren't going to melt if their soul melts, instead causing their eyes and mouth to have the ooze melt out of it, which can be directly seen when Kara uses all of their determination to destroy the universe, as their face begins to slowly melt and contort. In my original video, I left a few things open to suggestion. This being, why is Toriel's determination and magic so low, with Tutorial only having a determination value of 3, or having determination of 3, but actually only 150. This means that she has a magic level of 5. I think the answer a lot of people came to in the comments was the idea that Toriel has been untrained in magic, which means her magic power has decreased over time. This also explains why she's unable to control whether or not how much damage she does and whether or not she kills you, unlike something that Papyrus can do quite easily. No one has been able to, in my knowledge, answer why Flowey is able to reset, which should mean 8, but not be more powerful than Frisk, as Frisk takes over. The only answer that I think could be the case is the idea that Flowey didn't have as high determination. It's just that they themselves, or he himself, was a soul, which meant he could use his power more directly. And finally, if anyone has answered this, I'll be interested to hear it. But the only main problem with this is the fact that if every single monster has 1 determination, then why does when Azrael absorb them all, it only equal to 1 extra, like 7 extra determination? The main answer I've seen for this is the fact that even though the ratio itself is correct, just monsters have everything in a much less of it. So while both, like, a monster might have 3 determination and 12 magic, altogether the actual ratio might be like 6 determination or something, while with a human it could be 10 times more, because the ratio is just the smallest possible amount to explain it. But if you have any answers for these 3 points, then leave them in the comments. Also, this is the second point I want to bring up. This is something I didn't even think of when I originally made this theory, but now that it's come to my mind, I think it's good to mention it. But there's a chance that in the neutral route, instead of Frisk absorbing the soul and escaping, because of the fact that we don't fully Frisk out, and instead we just see white light, a black void, and then Sans phoning us in the neutral route, it could imply that Frisk never actually got out of Flowey's timeline, which means that Frisk might be dead in every neutral route. This is just like a theory based on a few weird details from neutral routes, but it could add another layer and would make sense, as Sans and that lot would only assume Frisk escaped because they would just see that Asgul's dead and that we are missing and assume that we managed to get out. But if you have any thoughts on that, leave it down below in the comments. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and share and leave a like. I'm trying to reach 500 subscribers by the end of my school term. But anyway, other than that, there's a few videos on screen now that you might like, and I'll see you guys next time.